What if your greatest fear, the fear that you're losing your faith, is actually the exact place where God is waiting to meet you? It is a strange and quiet grief, isn't it? To sit inside a house you spent your whole life building, only to realize the floorboards have quietly rotted away beneath your feet. You are listening to this because the math has stopped working. For years, perhaps for decades, the ledger balanced. You put the prayers in, you obeyed the rules, you sang the songs in the third row, and the universe responded with a general sense of coherence. But something shifted. A diagnosis, a betrayal, a slow, glacial erosion of the spirit that didn't arrive with a dramatic thunderclap, but with the terrifying, mundane drip of a leaky faucet in an empty house. Neurobiologically speaking, the human brain treats the loss of a worldview the exact same way it treats the death of a spouse. The amygdala fires a continuous, low-grade distress signal because the map it used to navigate reality has been rendered obsolete. You lie awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the cool draft of the air vent, reciting syllables into the dark. And for the very first time in your life, you feel the dizzying, nauseating vertigo of a person speaking into an entirely empty room. The great spiritual tragedy of our generation is not that people are walking away from God. It is that they are sitting inside the sanctuaries, holding their breath, suffocating under the weight of a script they can no longer make their mouths pronounce. When was the exact moment you stopped talking to God and started talking about Him in the past tense? Let us look at the anatomy of a Sunday morning. Historically, the modern Western worship experience is a masterclass in social choreography. The lighting is engineered to dim the periphery. The acoustics are balanced to create a psychoacoustic sense of collective unity. The tempo of the music sits right around 70 to 74 beats per minute, the exact resting heart rate of a calm human being. It is designed to soothe. And there you stand. Your hand is slightly raised or tucked strictly into your pocket. The person to your left is weeping in perceived ecstasy. The person to your right is taking notes in a leather journal. And inside your own rib cage, there is only a cold, flat slab of polished granite. You mouth the words, "You are good. You are good. You are never failing," while your molars are clenched so tightly your jaw aches. The soul possesses a violent, allergic reaction to performance. When an individual forces their exterior body to project a certainty their interior nervous system knows is false, the psyche undergoes a process called moral injury. You begin to view yourself not as a weary pilgrim, but as a spy behind enemy lines. You feel a sickening, quiet fraudulence. You walk out to the asphalt parking lot, unlock your car, put your hands on the steering wheel, and wonder, if they knew what was actually inside my head right now, would they still let me hold the communion tray? How much energy did it take you this week just to look like someone who isn't falling apart? The great irony of the Christian subculture is that it has built an entire vocabulary designed to insulate itself from your panic. When you finally muster the terrifying courage to crack the door open, when you tell a mentor or a parent or a small group leader, "I don't think I feel him anymore," the system almost universally deploys its defense mechanisms. You are handed religious gauze. You are told to just lean into the word. You are reminded that God won't give you more than you can bear, a theological bastardization of a verse about temptation, weaponized to explain away tragedy. Psychologically, we must understand why well-meaning people do this to you. Your doubt is an existential threat to their nervous system. If your prayers can go unanswered, then their prayers might go unanswered. If your child can get sick despite the anointing oil, then their living room is no longer safe. Therefore, the community must fix your doubt immediately, not to rescue your soul, but to stabilize their own theology. And so, the eternal truth of the gospel gets inverted. The very place designed to act as a hospital for the broken becomes a courtroom where the wounded are quietly cross-examined for their lack of optimism. You are left with a brutal, binary choice: pretend to be healed or be politely pushed to the margins. If you were to speak the absolute, unvarnished truth of your mind out loud tonight, who in your life would be terrified by it? To understand the sheer, breathtaking scandal of this tension, we have to leave the cushioned pews of the 21st century and travel to the eastern ridge of the Dead Sea in the year 30 AD. We must go to the fortress of Machaerus. If you visit the ruins of Machaerus today, the first thing that strikes you is the wind. It is a jagged, brutal limestone cone jutting out of the Jordanian desert, looking down into the toxic, salt-heavy waters below. Josephus, the first-century Roman Jewish historian, tells us this was King Herod Antipas's black site. Beneath the marble courtyards where the aristocracy drank imported Italian wine, there were subterranean cisterns carved into the bedrock. No natural light. A perpetual, bone-aching dampness. The smell of human waste, wet wool, and ancient stone. Inside one of those holes sat a man named John. We have sanitized John the Baptist into a stained glass icon, but the historical reality of the man is far more fierce. This was the man who spent 20 years in the scrub brush of the Judean wilderness eating dried locusts. The man who stood on the muddy banks of the Jordan River and looked the religious elite in the eye and called them a brood of vipers. This was the man whose sensory apparatus was so finely tuned to the holy that, according to the physician Luke, his very first act as a human fetus was to leap inside his mother's womb at the mere proximity of Mary. If anyone possessed an ironclad, bulletproof epistemology of God, it was John. He was the prototype. He was the one who pointed a calloused finger at a carpenter from Nazareth and said, "Behold." What do you do when the God who parted the Red Sea for your ancestors lets the water rise right up to your own chin? Sit with John in the dark of Machaerus. He has been down there for months. Above him, through 20 feet of Jordanian bedrock, he can hear the muffled, rhythmic thumping of Herod's birthday banquets. He can hear the laughter. He can hear the music. And upstairs, the man he publicly identified as the savior of the world is walking through the villages of Galilee, turning water into wedding wine, multiplying loaves of barley, and preaching sermons about the lilies of the field. Jesus is giving sight to anonymous beggars, while his own flesh and blood cousin is rotting in a sensory deprivation pit. Think of the psychological torture of that cell, the cold biting into his joints, the slow, creeping realization that the cavalry is not coming. The human mind, when starved of light and subjected to prolonged injustice, turns inward and begins to devour its own history. The memories that once served as anchors, the voice from the clouds, the dove descending over the river, begin to look like the delusions of a sun-baked desert fanatic. And so, John does the most dangerously honest thing recorded in the New Testament. He calls 2 of his remaining disciples to the iron grate of his cell, and he sends them walking north toward Galilee with a single question for Jesus. Matthew records it in chapter 11, verse 3. Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? Have you ever considered that the most sacred prayer you prayed this year wasn't an amen, but a why? Listen to the absolute shattering of that sentence. Or should we expect someone else? That is not the question of an atheist. An atheist doesn't ask who is coming. An atheist says the road is empty. That question is the agonizing cry of a lover who has been stood up at the altar. It is the sound of a human being whose theological framework has just collided at 80 miles an hour with the concrete wall of reality. John is saying, the version of the kingdom I preached does not account for this dungeon. The Messiah I imagined would have kicked these limestone doors off their hinges by now. If you are him, Why am I still in the dark? And this is where you sit tonight. You are trapped in the vice of the great paradox. On one side of your life stands the rigid Sunday doctrine that demands your absolute, unshakable certainty as the price of admission to the family of God. On the other side stands your lived experience, the empty nursery, the finalized divorce decree, the persistent chemical depression screaming that the universe is random and cold. You have been told that to hold both of those realities in your hands at the same time is a sin. You have been told that your doubt is a locked door, keeping God outside in the hallway. You are sitting in the damp bedrock of Machaerus, listening to the party upstairs, holding your broken pieces, terrified to speak the question out loud. If God is actually sitting inside this silence with you tonight, what is he waiting for you to stop pretending? If we're going to treat your pain with the dignity it deserves, we have to stop reading the New Testament as if it were written by Victorian clergymen sitting in upholstered armchairs. It wasn't. It was written by hunted, colonized, traumatized Middle Eastern men who smelled of dried fish, cheap olive oil, and Roman road dust. When those two disciples of John the Baptist turned their backs on the limestone fortress of Machaerus and began walking north toward Galilee, they weren't carrying a polite theological inquiry. They were carrying an 80-mile ticking bomb. Geographically, to walk from the eastern ridge of the Dead Sea up to the hills of Capernaum is a brutal ascent. It is 3 to 4 days on foot through the Jordan Rift Valley, a landscape that acts like a geological convection oven. Picture those two men walking. Their sandals are slapping against the basalt rock. The white sun is baking the salt into the creases of their necks. They are carrying the weight of a dying man's sanity. Doubt is almost never a solitary event. When a giant of the faith begins to collapse, it creates a localized gravity well that threatens to suck everyone around them into the dark. Those two disciples were walking north, knowing that the answer they brought back in their mouths would either reignite the dying embers in an old prophet's chest or extinguish him forever. When was the last time someone you loved handed you the shattered pieces of their faith, and you stood there realizing you didn't have the glue to put them back together? Let us look at the exact Greek syntax of the message they carried into the crowded plaza of Capernaum. When they finally pushed through the throng of peasants, smelling of sweat and 3 days of highway dirt, they stand before Jesus and recite John's exact words. Su e hoerchomenos, hi eteron prostokomen. In our English translations, we render the first phrase, "Are you the one who is to come?" It sounds like a gentle, romantic title, the coming one. But to a first-century Judean living under the suffocating military occupation of the Tiberius Caesar, O erchomenos was not a hallmark greeting. It was a high-voltage apocalyptic code word. For 400 years, the intertestamental literature of Israel had been crying out for ho erchomenos. In the minds of the zealots, the Essenes, and the street preachers, the coming one was the divine executioner. He was the cosmic warrior promised in Malachi chapter 4, who would arrive with his garments dipped in blood, who would take the Roman legions, the corrupt temple priesthood, and the puppet kings like Herod, and throw them into a winepress of wrath. John the Baptist had staked his entire mortal life on that definition. Just 24 months earlier, he had stood in the river and screamed to the crowds. His winnowing fork is in his hand. He will clear his threshing floor and burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. And now, John sits in a dungeon, looking at the data. Jesus isn't burning the chaff. Jesus is accepting dinner invitations from the chaff. Jesus is letting the Roman centurions build synagogues. He is letting the corrupt tax collectors buy him drinks. He is speaking in cryptic agricultural metaphors, while the geopolitical boot of Rome remains planted firmly on the neck of God's chosen people. The crisis of the human soul rarely happens because God breaks a promise. It happens because God breaks our definition of His promise. What is the specific secret contract you signed with God 5 years ago? The one where you quietly told Him, "If I give you my obedience, you are strictly obligated to give me this outcome." Now, look at the second half of John's question. It contains the most devastating syllable in the entire Gospel of Matthew. Or should we look for another? In the Koine Greek language, if you want to say the word another, you have two distinct grammatical choices. You can use the word allos, or you can use the word heteros. If you are holding a red apple and you ask me for allos, you are asking me to reach into the basket and hand you another apple of the exact same kind. Numerical duplication. But if you put the apple down on the table, look me in the eye, and ask for heteros, you are asking for something of an entirely different category. You are saying, take the apple away, bring me a stone, bring me a piece of bread. This species of thing is no longer working for me. When John the Baptist sits in the dark of Machaerus, he does not ask Jesus for allos. Matthew writes, "He heteron prostokomen." Should we expect a heteros? Do you feel the seismic, terrifying weight of that? John is not saying, "Jesus, are you busy? Should God send a backup prophet to help you out?" John is looking at the incarnate Son of God and saying, the entire paradigm of the Savior we have constructed is failing to account for human suffering. Are you actually the Messiah? Or do we need to invent a completely different genre of God? If the version of God you grew up singing to turned out to be a psychological projection of your own need for safety, would you have the stomach to stay in the room with the real one? Pay very close attention to what Jesus does next. He does not answer the question. If a modern public relations firm were handling Jesus of Nazareth, they would have told him, "Look, your lead endorser is wavering in the polls. Send a clear, unambiguous statement of solidarity to the prison. Say, 'Yes, John, I am he. Hold the line.'" Jesus refuses to give him a yes. Why? Because to say yes to a man whose definition of he is fundamentally flawed would be to validate an illusion. Instead, Jesus turns his back to the two messengers, spends the afternoon healing a crowd of anonymous Galileans, and then turns back to John's disciples with a piece of ancient literature. He says, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." To the casual reader, this looks like a beautiful, comforting proof of divine resume. But to John the Baptist, a man who had memorized the Hebrew scrolls since childhood, this response was a psychological earthquake. Jesus is stitching together two specific prophecies from the scroll of Isaiah, chapter 35 and chapter 61. Look at what Isaiah 61:1 actually says in the Hebrew text. "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, to proclaim good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners." Jesus stands in the bright Galilean sun, quotes Isaiah 61 to the disciples of a locked-up man, and intentionally deletes the final line of the sentence. He quotes the blind seeing, he quotes the dead rising, and he deliberately cuts the prophecy off right at the exact threshold of John's iron door. How do you survive the Tuesday morning when God explicitly demonstrates his miraculous power to the person sitting in the cubicle next to you, while consciously choosing to withhold it from your own home? Sit with the shocking, surgical precision of that omission. Jesus is sending a message back to the black site of Machaerus that says, "John, the kingdom of God has arrived. The cosmos is being restored. The dead are waking up. But your cell door is going to stay shut. You are going to die down there in the dark. And I need to know if I am still your God, even if I refuse to be your rescuer." And then, Jesus attaches the final, lingering sentence. Verse 6, "And blessed is the one who is not offended by me." In the English language, the word offended brings to mind someone whose feelings have been slightly bruised at a dinner party. It sounds petty. The word Jesus speaks in the Greek is skandalisthe. It is the verbal form of the noun skandalon. If you go to a first-century Greek text on hunting and trapping, the skandalon is not a mistake you trip over in the street. The skandalon was the name of the flexible, curved wooden trigger stick placed inside a baited animal snare. It was the spring-loaded mechanism that held the bait. When the wild creature walked into the cage and bit into the food, it brushed against the skandalon, and the stick snapped, causing the wooden door to drop instantly behind them, locking them in the dark. Read verse 6 again through the eyes of a trapped man. "Blessed is the human being who does not look at my methods and feel like they have walked into a trap." That is the exegetical floor of the dark night. Jesus is looking across 80 miles of desert into the eyes of his dearest friend and saying, "The greatest spiritual test of your life will not be surviving the cruelty of King Herod. The greatest test of your life will be surviving the scandal of my sovereignty. You followed the scent of grace into the wilderness, John, and the trap door just fell behind you. Will you curse the hunter, or will you trust the hand that set the cage?" At what precise coordinate in your personal history did the goodness of God stop feeling like a gift and start feeling like a snare? We like to comfort ourselves with the illusion that John the Baptist was a historical anomaly, a solitary mountain peak struck by a freak lightning bolt of despair. He wasn't. He was simply enacting the universal, predictable trajectory of the human psyche when it collides with the unmanipulable mystery of God. If we look back 900 years before John sat in his Jordanian pit, we find this exact psychological fracture recorded in the archives of Israel's Golden Age. We find it in the life of a man named Asaph. If King David was the political architect of Israel's worship, Asaph was its chief acoustic engineer. He was a Levite of the Gershonite clan, handpicked by David to stand before the Ark of the Covenant with bronze cymbals. He authored 12 psalms in our canon. He was the man who literally wrote the liturgy. He stood on the elevated platform in Jerusalem week after week, lifting his hands, instructing an entire nation on the precise emotional posture they were required to hold before the Almighty. He was the professional believer. And then you open Psalm 73 and you read his private diary. He doesn't open his song with a majestic trumpet blast. He opens it with the quiet, breathless confession of a man who just caught himself slipping off a ledge. Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold. When you look at the people around you who seem to glide through their spiritual lives with an effortless, frictionless certainty, what is the exact secret story you tell yourself about your own brokenness? To understand why Asaph's feet slipped, we have to look at the two modern ways human beings attempt to survive this exact same cognitive vertigo. Look first at Julian. Julian is 44 years old. He is a managing director at a private equity firm in Dallas, and he serves on the elder board of a 4,000-member suburban church. Julian does not do things halfway. His entire existence is an exercise in hyper-optimized algorithmic control. He wakes up at 4:45 a.m. He sits in a cold plunge. He drinks a measured double espresso. He spends 22 minutes reading a structured devotional on an iPad Pro, carefully highlighting verses about stewardship and divine favor in neat yellow digital ink. Julian's theology is a pristine, beautifully illuminated spreadsheet. Column A, human obedience. Column B, divine protection. The formulas have been checked. The macro executes flawlessly. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, Julian's 14-year-old daughter is diagnosed with a rare, aggressive osteosarcoma in her left femur. Watch what happens to Julian's nervous system. He does not collapse into weeping. He collapses into project management. He flies in specialists from Houston. He organizes 24-hour prayer chains. He fasts on Wednesdays. He treats the throne of the Almighty like a stubborn corporate board that simply requires a more compelling presentation of the data. 6 months later, he is sitting in the driver's seat of his parked car in the level 4 parking garage of the Children's Hospital. The engine is idling. The air conditioning is humming. On the passenger seat sits a sterile plastic bag containing his daughter's favorite hoodie. She is in the ICU, chemically sedated, her body failing to respond to the 3rd round of chemotherapy. Julian looks down at his glowing iPad. He looks at the yellow highlights. And in that sterile, concrete parking structure, the spreadsheet corrupts. The math returns a fatal syntax error. Julian does not feel a burning anger at God. He feels something far more terrifying. He feels an absolute, glacial nothingness. He realizes with a sickening internal drop that his entire 20-year history of disciplined piety was not an act of love toward a father. It was an elaborate, highly sophisticated psychological insurance policy designed to guarantee that his children would never get sick. How many of your most celebrated spiritual disciplines are no longer acts of devotion, but frantic, exhausting attempts to keep the universe from hurting you? Now, turn your head and look at Elena. Elena is 31. 7 years ago, she was the first person inside the church doors on Sunday morning. She ran the slide projector for the youth ministry. She spent her summers sleeping on thin foam mattresses on mission trips to Guatemala. Her Bible was held together by strips of black packing tape, its margins overflowing with breathless, multicolored ink notes about the radical love of Jesus. Then, her world fractured. It wasn't a medical diagnosis. It was a slow, suffocating discovery of profound, unrepentant moral corruption inside the pastoral leadership she had trusted with her soul. When Elena brought the evidence to the board, she wasn't protected. She was quietly, systematically gaslit. She was told to protect the reputation of the ministry. She was told her tone was divisive. Elena walked out of those glass double doors on a rainy Sunday in November and vowed she would never let her bare feet touch the carpet of a sanctuary again. Today, if you look at Elena's Instagram profile, she is sharp, brilliantly articulate, and fiercely deconstructed. She posts biting, razor-sharp deconstructions of evangelical platitudes. She listens to sociology podcasts. She has built an ironclad intellectual fortress around her chest. Our culture applauds Elena. We tell her she has found her liberation. But sit with Elena at 2:15 a.m. on a Thursday, when her apartment is dead silent and the blue light of her smartphone finally goes dark. The cynicism she wears like a tailored trench coat doesn't feel like freedom in the dark. It feels like a heavy, lead-lined suit of armor that she is biologically trapped inside. Elena didn't kill her desperate, weeping hunger for the sacred. She simply buried it alive beneath 6 feet of intellectual sarcasm. Because her nervous system calculated that cynicism is infinitely safer than vulnerability. If you were to strip away the brilliant armor of your sarcasm, your theological deconstruction, and your sharp intellectual critiques, what is the raw, shivering child underneath it all still waiting for God to apologize for? Bring Julian, Elena, and Asaph into the same room. They are suffering from the exact same existential diagnosis, but notice the divergence in their methodology. When modern human beings collide with the unbearable silence of God, our post-Enlightenment culture offers us only 2 approved emergency exits: optimization or amputation. Julian chooses optimization. The system is broken, therefore I must work harder, pray longer, fast stricter, and fix the methodology until the machine dispenses the miracle. Elena chooses amputation. The system is a lie, therefore I must sever the limb, declare the sky empty, and walk into the secular wilderness where no one can ever promise me a resurrection again. Both of these choices are profoundly human. Both of them are desperate, understandable psychological defense mechanisms against the one sensation the human ego will do anything to avoid: absolute, unmitigated helplessness. Now, look at what Asaph does in Psalm 73. He looks at the corrupt aristocracy of Jerusalem. He writes, in verses 12 and 13, "This is what the wicked are like, always free of care, they go on amassing wealth. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure and have washed my hands in innocence." Let us look at the ancient Hebrew beneath that sentence. When Asaph writes the phrase, "in vain," the word his quill scratches into the parchment is rik. In ancient Semitic literature, rik is not a synonym for unsuccessful. Rik is the word used to describe an entirely empty grain silo during a famine. It is the word used to describe a dry well in the middle of the Negev desert. It means a vacuum, a hollow, echoing void. Asaph is standing on the temple stage, holding his bronze cymbals, looking at his decades of sexual purity, his tithing, his strict dietary obedience, and he is saying out loud to the universe, "I have poured my entire mortal life into a bucket with no bottom. I am bankrupt." Have you ever sat alone in the dark and allowed your mind to think the utterly forbidden thought, what if the people who don't give a damn about God are actually having a better life than me? Here is where Asaph splits the timeline of human history. When Asaph hits the rik, the vacuum, he does not optimize like Julian. He doesn't go buy a new scroll on 7 steps to reigniting your Levitical passion. And he does not amputate like Elena. He doesn't throw his bronze cymbals into the Kidron Valley and go join a Philistine merchant caravan. He does something that violates every modern instinct of emotional self-preservation. Look at verse 16. "When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply." The Hebrew verb Asaph uses for troubled is amal. If you open the book of Ecclesiastes, amal is the word used to describe bone-crushing, agonizing, unrewarded slave labor under a scorching sun. Asaph is saying, trying to make God's character fit into the math of this world's suffering is an exhausting, violent physical labor that is tearing my psyche apart. And what does he do with that radioactive, toxic amal? Verse 17. "Until I entered the sanctuary of God." Do not rush past those words. Do not let your Sunday school conditioning turn that into a peaceful pastoral painting. Asaph did not wait until his doubt was resolved to go into the sanctuary. He did not sanitize his fury in the parking lot. He took his rik, his hollow, bitter emptiness. He took his amal, his exhausting intellectual rage, and he dragged the rotting, unembalmed corpse of his disappointment straight through the heavy bronze doors of the holy place. He walked right past the altar of incense. He walked right past the polished mahogany tables. He stood in the dim, flickering candlelight of the presence, holding a shattered theology in his bleeding hands, and he essentially said, "I do not understand you. I am disgusted by how you run this world. My feet are slipping off the edge of the cliff, but you are the only reality in this universe. So if I am going to bleed to death tonight, I'm going to do it right here on your carpet." If you actually believed that God prefers your screaming, exhausted honesty over your polite, plastic fake worship, what would you stop hiding from him before you go to sleep tonight? We have sat inside the ruin for 24 minutes. We have looked at the iron snare of Machaerus. We have touched the dry, cracked bottom of Asaph's empty grain silo. And now, we must ask the question that turns the entire axis of the human soul. What if the collapse of your certainty was not an act of divine abandonment, but an act of divine demolition? What if the floorboards rotting beneath your feet was not the tragic accident of a neglected house, but the deliberate, surgical work of an architect who realized the structure you built was far too small for you to survive inside. If you were to discover tonight that God deliberately turned the lights out in your living room, what is the fragile wooden idol he is trying to keep you from bowing down to anymore? Let us look at developmental psychology. Around the age of 7 to 9 months, a human infant undergoes a monumental neurological leap known as object permanence. Before this threshold, if a mother places a brightly colored toy under a wool blanket, the child does not search for it. To the infant's unformed visual cortex, out of sight is literally out of existence. The universe is strictly bounded by immediate sensory feedback. When the mother steps into the hallway to pull the front door shut, the child screams, not because they are being manipulative, but because their nervous system registers an apocalyptic extinction event. She has evaporated. The world has ended. Now, transpose that neurobiology onto your spiritual biography. For the first decade of your faith, God treated you like an infant. He fed you spiritual sugar. You prayed for the bank account to stretch, and the check arrived in the mail. You raised your hands during the bridge of the song, and a warm, golden rush of dopamine flooded your chest. You read a verse at 7 a.m., and the sky felt crisp, orderly, and obedient. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, the Father stepped into the hallway. The spiritual sugar stopped dispensing, the sensory feedback went dead flat, and your nervous system, conditioned by a decade of religious culture to equate feeling with fact, triggered the infant scream. He is gone. I'm speaking to plaster. I have lost my faith. Have you been confusing the withdrawal of God's emotional candy with the withdrawal of his actual character? To survive this hallway, we have to resurrect a lost theological jewel that the modern evangelical complex buried beneath centuries of bright, neon certainty. In the 4th century, a brilliant Cappadocian bishop named Gregory of Nyssa wrote a masterpiece called The Life of Moses. Gregory noticed a profound, counterintuitive progression in how the human soul ascends toward the Creator. Look at Moses' itinerary. When Moses is a spiritual novice, an insecure exile keeping sheep in the dirt of Midian, how does God appear to him? In light, a burning bush, blinding, unmistakable, luminous brightness. When Moses leads the nation out of Egypt as a developing leader, how does God appear? In a cloud, a pillar of smoke, shifting, partially obscured, casting long shadows across the sand. But when Moses reaches the absolute zenith of his spiritual maturity, when he climbs to the jagged, razor-sharp summit of Mount Sinai to stand face to face with the Almighty, what does the book of Exodus record? Exodus chapter 20, verse 21. The people remained at a distance, while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. The Greek Septuagint translates that phrase, thick darkness, as gnophos. It does not mean a peaceful twilight. It means an impenetrable, suffocating, pitch-black storm cloud where visual orientation is mathematically impossible. Gregory of Nyssa laid down the great paradox of Christian mysticism. God begins in luminous light, but he resides in the gnophos. The light was merely the hook. The light was the kindergarten picture book designed to get your eyes off the dirt. But as long as you demand that God remain bright, easily digestible, and thoroughly comprehensible, you are relating to a deity shaped like your own intellect. What if the pitch-black fog you are walking through right now is not the distance of God, but the terrifying proximity of his summit? Let this objective truth wash over your exhausted, hyper-vigilant nervous system tonight. Your doubt is not a moral failure. It is the violent, agonizing molting of an exoskeleton. When a crustacean grows, its soft interior tissue expands until it is biologically trapped inside its own hard, protective shell. The very armor that kept it safe from predators in its youth becomes its prison. To survive, the creature must crawl under a dark rock, undergo a terrifying internal buildup of hydraulic pressure, and literally split its own spine open to drag its raw, bleeding body out of the dead shell. For 48 hours, it sits in the dark, entirely defenseless. If a passing predator finds it, it dies. That defenseless, shivering, shell-less state is what our culture calls deconstruction. You feel like an imposter sitting in the third row on Sunday morning, not because your heart has turned wicked, but because your soul has expanded past the rigid, cardboard dimensions of the religious box you were handed when you were 12 years old. You were trying to squeeze a 40-year-old, grief-stricken, battle-scarred human heart into a child's plastic playhouse. Of course the walls are buckling. Of course the roof is caving in. God is not sitting in the cosmos looking down at your corrupted spreadsheet with a red grading pen, shaking his head at your lack of optimism. He is the one sitting in the dirt next to the discarded shell, quietly whispering, "Let it shatter. Let the cheap plaster break. I am so tired of you loving the blueprint. I want you to finally live inside the house." If you stopped apologizing to God for outgrowing your old armor, what raw, unprotected part of you would you finally let him touch tonight? You've spent the better part of an hour drifting through the ruins of your own shattered theology. We have walked the limestone ramparts of Machaerus with the doubt of John. We have stood in the temple courts with the amyl of Asaph. We have felt the terrifying pressure of your own spirit cracking its shell in the dark. You are still here, and that, in itself, is the first miracle. You have been told that the Christian life is about the accumulation of right answers. You have been told that faith is the sum of your cognitive assent to a list of propositions. You have been told that if you lose your grip on the propositions, you lose your grip on the divine. But tonight, we perform a metanoia. Metanoia, the Greek word that the New Testament writers chose to translate as repentance. We have reduced it to a groveling moralistic apology, but the etymology of the word has nothing to do with guilt. Meta, beyond. Noia, the mind. Metanoia is not, "I am sorry I was bad." Metanoia is a fundamental, structural shift in the architecture of your consciousness. It is the moment you stop trying to look at God and realize you are being looked at by Him. Let us look at the solution. Not the logical solution to your suffering, for that does not exist, but the relational solution to your isolation. Turn your heart to the words of Jesus in Matthew 11:28-30. We have recited them until they are dull. Let us hear them with the ears of a man dying in a cell, or a woman weeping in a parked car at midnight. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Stop. Who does he invite? He does not invite the pure in heart. He does not invite the spiritually disciplined. He does not invite those with the correct systematic theology. He invites the weary. The Greek word Jesus uses here, kopiontes, describes a person who has been working in the heat of the day until they are physically, biologically, and psychologically spent. It describes the exhaustion of someone who has tried to move a mountain and succeeded only in breaking their own back. He is looking directly at your state of total, catastrophic burnout. He is looking at your skepticism. He is looking at the fact that you no longer have the strength to hold the shield of faith up against the wind. And he says, "Come." What if coming to Jesus doesn't require you to bring your best, shiniest, most faithful version of yourself? What if you are allowed to arrive exactly as you are, leaking, broken, cynical, and empty-handed? Here is your first step of psychological action, the liturgy of the Sabbath from certainty. For the next 7 days, you are going to take a formal, deliberate vacation from trying to solve the mystery of your life. When your mind begins to spin, when you start the familiar, agonizing loop of, why did this happen? Why didn't God stop it? Does he even hear me? You are going to physically stop. You are going to touch your hand to your chest, feel your own heartbeat, and you are going to say this prayer out loud. Lord, I release the demand for an explanation. I accept the mystery of the dark. I am not the master of the logic, and I am finally finished trying to play the part. This is not a prayer of giving up on God. This is the prayer of abandoning the arrogance of the creature who thinks they can judge the Creator. When you release the need to understand, you stop engaging in a battle with the silence. You stop fighting the fog. And for the first time, you might notice that the fog is not a wall, it is an environment. The second action, the posture of the empty hand. Jesus concludes that invitation in Matthew 11 by saying, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." A yoke was never a tool of oppression. A yoke was a wooden beam crafted by an artisan to allow 2 oxen to pull a load together. The primary ox, the mature, strong, seasoned ox, is harnessed to the same beam as the younger, weaker, struggling ox. The yoke is designed so that the younger ox literally cannot bear the weight alone. The wood shifts the burden onto the shoulders of the elder ox. You've been trying to pull the plow of your own life by yourself. You have been trying to drag your own suffering, your own doubts, your own failures across the field. Jesus is not asking you to carry more spiritual weight. He is asking you to get under the yoke with him. Stop asking him to fix the field. Stop asking him to make the soil easier. Just walk. This is the practice of incarnational presence. For 10 minutes every day, I want you to find a quiet place. Not a place of prayer, not a place of devotion, just a quiet place. Sit in a chair. Do not read your Bible. Do not listen to a sermon. Do not attempt to feel anything. Sit, close your eyes, and simply acknowledge that the one who sustains the galaxies with a word is currently occupying the exact same 10 square feet of space that you are. If you feel nothing, that is fine. If you feel anger, that is fine. If you feel bored, that is fine. Do not try to fix your internal state. Just sit in the room with him, like a child who has had a terrible day, sitting in silence on the porch next to their father. The child doesn't need to speak. The father doesn't need to give a lecture. Just be together. What would happen to your anxiety if you finally stopped trying to perform for an audience of one and started simply existing in the company of one? The third action, the sanctification of the naphos. We return to the naphos, the thick darkness. You are going to stop viewing your silence as an absence of God. The ancient desert mothers and fathers, the ones who spent decades in the caves of Egypt, taught that God's presence has 2 modes, the luminous and the obscure. The luminous is the milk. It is the joy, the clarity, the answered prayer. The obscure is the meat. It is the silence, the doubt, the struggle, the lack of orientation. You've been trying to live on milk, and you are starving. The silence you are walking through right now, that is not God leaving the room. That is God becoming the room. He is so much larger than your capacity to perceive him that when he draws near, your human senses report darkness and emptiness because they are overwhelmed by the sheer, infinite density of his reality. A flashlight is bright in a cave, but if you stand in front of the midday sun, you are blinded. You see nothing. The darkness you are feeling is the blinding, unfiltered reality of a God who is currently rewriting the very DNA of your soul. He is stripping away the version of you that needed him to be a cosmic butler. He is birthing the version of you that can love him for who he is, not for what he does for you. You are going to take the word why, and you are going to replace it with the word here. Every time your brain screams, Why is this happening? You're going to answer, I don't know, but you are here. Every time your heart screams, where are you? You are going to answer, I cannot see you, but you are here. This is the psychological discipline of anchoring. It is not a suppression of your pain, it is a redirection of your focus. You are tethering your wandering, terrified mind to the singular, unchangeable fact of the incarnation. He took on flesh. He sat in the dust. He felt the cold. He endured the betrayal. He died in the dark. He did not stay in the luminous. He walked all the way into the obscure, all the way into the grave, all the way into the Sheol, the place of the dead, the place of total silence, so that there is not a single coordinate in the universe where you can go, where you can suffer, where you can despair, that he has not already occupied. He is there, in your doubt. He is sitting right there in the middle of your unbelief, holding the other side of the yoke. You are safe. Not safe from the world, not safe from the tragedy, not safe from the storm, but you are safe in the one who allows the storm. Tonight, before you sleep, do not try to pray it away. Do not try to generate a feeling of peace that isn't there. Be honest, be raw, be quiet. Tell him, I don't get it. I am scared. I am exhausted. I don't know if you are there, but I am staying in the room. That sentence, spoken into the dark, is more faithful than 1,000 shouted anthems in a crowded sanctuary. You are not losing your faith. You are just finally starting to have one. You have traveled through the storm of your own mind. You have stood in the dark of the dungeon. You have felt the shifting sands of the desert, and you have, hopefully, caught a glimpse of the anchor. But intellectual understanding is not transformation. We have dissected the anatomy of your doubt. We have mapped the terrain of your anxiety, and we have dismantled the idols of your certainty. Now, the final, most dangerous work begins. The work of looking in the mirror and asking the questions you have been running from for years. This is not a checklist. It is a mirror. Do not rush this. If you need to stop the audio, stop it. If you need to walk outside and breathe the air, do it. But do not let these words slide off the surface of your skin. Let them sink into the marrow. The inquiry of the heart one. What is the specific, secret bargain you have been trying to make with God? The one where you quietly promised him your devotion in exchange for a life free from deep, unexplainable suffering. 2. When you look at the people in your life who have never known a dark night, who seem to breeze through faith with a plastic, untouchable certainty, do you feel a sense of peace? Or do you feel a cold, hard resentment? And why do you think their ease is the standard against which you measure your own validity? 3. If you were stripped of your Christian resume, the service hours, the Bible knowledge, the outward appearance of piety, the labels you wear, who is the person left standing in the dark? And why are you so terrified that that person is unlovable? 4. What is the one question about your pain that you have refused to ask God, for fear that the answer would finally shatter the last remnants of your faith? What are you afraid to know? 5. How much of your faith has actually been a sophisticated defense mechanism, a way of creating a predictable, controlled universe where you are the architect, and God is simply the foreman who executes your blueprints? 6. When you feel the silence of God, do you interpret it as a rejection of your presence, or as an invitation to stop talking and start simply being? What happens to your anxiety when you treat the silence as a holding rather than an abandonment? 7. If you believed, truly believed, that God was not offended by your unbelief, but was instead leaning in to hear the honest, raw, ugly truth of your struggle, what would change about the way you speak to him tonight? 8. What have you been mourning? What version of your life, what hope, what dream that you haven't yet had the courage to place in the hands of the Father because you are afraid He will ask you to let it die? The questions are meant to reveal the truth, but the prophetic voice is meant to establish your identity. You have been speaking to yourself in the language of condemnation for far too long. Your own inner critic has been using the vocabulary of legalism to judge your soul. Now hear the truth of who you are, spoken not from a podium, but from the stillness of the presence that you are sitting in right now. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a human being to be loved. Stop treating your doubt as a defect in your machinery. Your doubt is the growing pain of a heart that is outgrowing the cage it was raised in. You are not failing the test. You are entering the deeper curriculum. Your honesty is your highest form of worship. Do you understand this? The God of the universe is not interested in your sanitized Sunday best performance. He is tired of the masks. He is tired of the polished prayers. He is hungry for you. When you come to Him with a shattered, skeptical, exhausted heart, you are offering Him something far more valuable than the praise of the person who has never been broken. You are offering Him the truth. And the truth is the only place where He can actually meet you. You are held, even when you cannot feel the hand. Your inability to perceive the presence of God is not proof of His absence. It is proof of your own physical and emotional limitations. You are a finite creature in a mortal body, walking through a world of shadow. Of course you are confused. Of course you are frightened. The fact that you feel lost is not a sign that the way has disappeared. It is a sign that you have finally stopped pretending you know the map. You are allowed to rest in the not yet. You do not need to figure this all out tonight. You do not need to resolve the paradox before you go to sleep. You do not need to reconcile the cruelty of the world with the goodness of God in the next 10 minutes. You are permitted to sit in the tension. You are permitted to be a work in progress. You are permitted to simply breathe and to trust that the one who started this work in you is far more committed to finishing it than you are. You are His, even in the darkness. There is no dark night so deep, no gnaphos so thick that it can separate you from the love of the architect. He has been in your pit. He has sat in your prison. He has endured your betrayal. He has walked your path of suffering. He is not watching you from a distance. He is sitting on the floor of the room with you. The benediction of the present. The dialogue is over. You do not need to pray a conclusion prayer to wrap this up in a bow. You do not need to force a feeling of resolution. Take this question with you into the next week. What if the God you are so desperately searching for is not hiding in the answers, but waiting for you in the middle of your question? You have done enough today. You have carried enough. You have performed enough. The silence is not waiting for you to fill it. The darkness is not waiting for you to illuminate it. The Father is simply waiting for you to stop running. Let the questions sit. Let the weight fall. And just breathe. You are exactly where you need to be. You have done the work. You have walked the valley, you have sat in the dark, and you have wrestled with the silence. If you feel like you haven't figured it out, that is perfect. You were never meant to. The goal of this hour was not to give you a map that eliminates the fog. It was to give you a hand to hold while you walk through it. You are going to walk out of this room, and the world is still going to be loud. The problems you paused for these 60 minutes will still be waiting on the other side of your door. The diagnosis will still be there. The bills will still be unpaid. The silence will, at times, still feel heavy. But something has shifted in your interior. You have brought your doubt out of the shadows. You have stopped treating your struggle as a sign of spiritual death and started seeing it for what it is: the desperate, hungry search for a reality that is larger than your current capacity to contain. Hold this verse in your mind like a stone you carry in your pocket, smooth, solid, always there when you need to grip it. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Hebrews 4:16. Notice the location. It is a throne of grace. It is not a bench of judgment. It is not a court of evidence where you must prove your certainty before you are allowed to ask for help. It is a place where mercy is the currency, and where your time of need, your messy, doubting, fractured human moment, is the only credential you need to enter. A prayer for the weary. Close your eyes. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your hands open, palms facing up, resting on your lap. Do not try to make yourself feel holy. Just be honest. Father, I am tired. I have spent so much energy trying to protect my faith, trying to prove my loyalty, and trying to keep the panic at bay. I'm tired of the noise. You know the questions I haven't been able to say out loud. You know the places where my heart feels hard, where my mind feels skeptical, and where my spirit feels hollow. You know the secret suspicions I have been terrified to voice for fear that they would push you away. I am not asking you to fix the world tonight. I am not even asking you to fix me. I'm just asking for the courage to stay in the room with you. Take my doubt. Take my exhaustion. Take my shaking hands. They are the only things I have, and I am finally finished trying to hide them from you. I don't need a miracle of explanation. I don't need a sign in the sky. I just need to know that when I sit in the dark, I am not sitting alone. Be the anchor in the middle of my confusion. Be the grace that covers the places where my faith runs out. I am here. I am messy, and I am yours. Amen. You are safe. The God who holds the stars in their places is the same God who is holding the broken pieces of your mind. You do not need to hurry. You do not need to perform. Just breathe. One day at a time, one question at a time, one breath at a time. You are exactly where you need to be.